So, short recap of the last video. Go back to the video if you want to watch it. It's great. It really is important to understand the last video in order to understand today's video. Last video we talked about how there are two trends that really bother the hell out of me. One, that having a boy best friend as a girl is somehow a ticking time bomb for feelings, and therefore you should not be friends with men. And the other hand, you've got that this also leads to a distrust of your partner because there is no reason to associate with any other women. These two trends contribute massively to sexism and misogyny and problems in society like male loneliness. I posited 3 questions that we're going to answer over the course of the 3 videos. The first we answered about why you need to get yourself a girl best friend. And the second question that we're going to answer today, how our view of relationships creates a toxicity that I personally hate. Today, we are further delving into the issue of emotional intimacy, and I'll try to explain why the connections that we have with most people are so hollow and what we can do to improve them. Because it all starts with the way that we think about romantic relationships. Romantic connections are potentially the most beautiful connections in our lives. However, they are marred by the problems that I've laid out in last video, that we only ever have romantic connections and emotional intimacy together, especially for men. Women have emotionally intimate connections with other women, like we talked about last video, but men usually only have emotionally intimate connections in the context of relationships. So when we say that love is like loving our partner as much as we love ourselves and becoming one in a way, losing them actually is the end of our world as we know it. It's not because they were super important, it is because we put so much importance on our partner in the way that we visualize love, that it is the most important connection in life. And that is where the core of my issue starts here. Because a romantic relationship should not just be the thing in life that you aspire to get, because it is a connection in your life, one of many. I hope that you can create a large social safety net of people you can rely on and not just always go to this one person. Then the need for friends becomes kind of secondary. If you visualize love as being the thing, that it is the ultimate person that you always go to, that you create sacred memories, have a bond of trust that can be inseparable until death, then that is romantic and that's nice, but in many ways it's also quite isolating towards the rest of the world. So, your partner is actually quite important. There are things that you just do with your partner that are said by society is normal to do. Think about small to large things of meeting their parents or going on trips together, living together, maybe even starting a family, doing the sexy time that I'm told people do when they love each other very much. And in many ways, what I really want to explore today, your partner holds the exclusive monopoly on the keys to your heart. Like we talked about last video, especially for men this exclusive monopoly exists, because they only ever go to their partners for emotional intimacy. And both ways this is quite damaging. That the idea that you only ever go to your partner first and foremost when it comes to matters of the heart. So having this exclusive monopoly is actually quite damaging to our relationship dynamics. Especially for men, like we explored last video, women do have the exclusive monopoly on emotional intimacy because they don't go to anyone else with their feelings. And this starts to weigh down on the relationship, more expectations that your partner could not possibly satisfy all of them off. Also, if you're dating, there are so many expectations that make it damn near impossible to find someone that you're actually happy with and can explore the world with. So let's go down the list of these expectations of how difficult it actually can be. You need to find someone that is attractive enough for you, that you are compatible with, so your lives are somewhat similar, that you are sexually compatible with, so they are open-minded enough to explore with you the things that you want to try in the bedroom, and that there are chemistry there. There's also that you communicate in similar ways, so you do not miscommunicate all of the time and become frustrated, so getting on each other's level. You need to be able to spend potentially infinite amounts of time with them, and that gets easier if you have similar senses of humor. You want to probably have similar values when it comes to friends and family, so that doesn't bring a source of conflict, which by extent is also political values if you find it important like I do, or religious views even. And so having similar plans for the future so you do not compromise on what you truly want, so that you do not have the situation that if you really want to have a family and your partner doesn't, that you start to resent them for it over time. And you can then realize that it is actually quite difficult to find a partner that fits the bill on all fronts, planning a future so you can have your happily ever after. At this pace, you want someone to be a jack of all trades, master of all. And that's a reason why they say a jack of all trades, master of none, because it's impossible to fit the bill on all fronts. You're basically expecting someone to be a beautiful version of you with the emotional competence of a therapist that is as patient with you as the gods are with me responding to my wishes, which, I mean, hopefully one day. You expect them to be like a sex god almost, a good parent potentially, have similar values to you, and so on and so on. Not even to speak about gender roles, that you want your partner to be roughly as much in their gender role, taking it seriously as you are with yours. That you have people saying that they want to be in their divine feminine energy and therefore you need a divine masculine person to complement you. All of this nonsense comes together that at this rate it is so important to be happy in a relationship with someone that fits the bill on all fronts that we are either doomed to be single, we have to lower our standards, or we are going to be unhappy in our relationships. And that's necessary, because sorry to tell you, Chief, if these are your expectations, then everyone is bound to inevitably disappoint. And this is the biggest problem that I have with the way that we look at relationships nowadays. We try to stuff everything into one person, and especially when we look at the thing that we're going to look at today with emotional intimacy, talking about issues that matter to the heart, why would that need to solely be focused on one person? We put so much pressure on our relationships that it's bound to disappoint. And therefore, especially when we talk about emotional needs, it's quite easy to outsource it to a broad social safety net of people that you trust dearly. Friends, best friends, friends of the other sex. We've talked about this before. But it's also necessary to do so because talking about stuff that matters to you, going to them first, or just talking about them and wanting their perspective is essential to enrich and broaden your friend connections. We talked about that a few weeks ago. This will effectively take some pressure off the relationship and allow them to be fun and not be disappointed if your partner does not fit the bill or does not have the energy to talk to you about everything all the time. Focusing everything on your partner only like a glorified meal is making sure that we isolate ourselves from the rest of the world. Having relationships be exclusionary is what I hate about them. If you, for example, say that your partner is the first and sometimes only person you go to when it comes to your emotional needs, you don't see the point in going to friends and enriching those connections, and so it starts to grow neglected and die off, isolating you from the rest of the world instead of having the relationship enrich your life. This idea that your partner is the one and only is not a new problem, but it is something that we make worse nowadays by doing historical revisionism effectively. So what we do is that we look upon the past with our current norms. We think that because we think our partners are the one and only, this must have been that way throughout the past, and so we make media, for example, depicting it as such. A very good way to explain what historical revisionism is, for example, is to speak about child rearing. When it comes to raising a child, we nowadays see the atomic family as the unit of rearing children. The parents have the sole and exclusive responsibility for their children. If you get screwed up, it's your parents' fault directly. But through most of human history, social organization has been quite different. And so when they say it takes a village to raise a child, that was actually quite true for most of human history, and still in some villages in, for example, southern Spain or in Africa, that life is more communal, and so the way that children are raised reflects that. So the atomic family of having a father and a mother and their children be the unit of child rearing is not always been this way. Children in communal living would grow up playing with other children in the village. They would eat together probably at one parent's house, and you would not always eat at home directly. They would interact with other children. They would have influences from many different adults teaching things about life. And because everyone knew each other, there was this social safety net that would collectively raise the children for who they were going to be. And again, in rural towns nowadays, it still happens somewhat. If your parent wasn't particularly good at parenting, that wasn't the end of the world. You weren't screwed up for life, because you'd have many different adults influencing your life. You might have even gotten life lessons or even practical skills from interacting with so many people in your life. Networking, they'd say. To quote Iroh in The Last Airbender, that said it better than I ever could, it's important to draw wisdom from many different places. If you only ever draw it from one source, it becomes rigid and stale. So when I say that we do historical revisionism with romantic relationships, it's mostly that we overemphasize their importance in our lives. Think about marriage. Marriage isn't that thing that has always dictated human relationships. It's not even that important for most of human history, especially for us peasants. For the majority of the time that marriage has been around, it was solely for political elites to forge alliances and to secure lines of succession. When it finally became able to be married by us peasants, it really didn't take off until the post-Second World War era, when all of a sudden lots of middle-class people became interested in getting married and throwing these huge wedding parties. Romantic relationships then are way overemphasized compared to all other connections that you might have. Think about your peers at school or work, or your sport buddies, or your friends, or the people in the local bar, or your community, or your church of choice. All of these connections used to be way more important, and they still can be more important and fulfilling if we do not monopolize all our emotional needs to one person, one type of connection. There's also a reason why we feel the need to overemphasize romantic love so much, and it's not necessarily romanticism. Living in our current capitalist hellhole, you get that every minute of productive labor time gets squeezed out of you with making longer hours for lower wages to make ends meet. And that is actually very mentally draining, because you don't have time anymore to have a rich social safety net and invest energy into other people. All of a sudden, a partner is the only connection that you can afford to maintain. A very good case study of this is Japan, which has frankly insane work culture for quite a while. Many hours are spent socializing after work, even as part of the work, because you are expected to do it. Or people sleeping at work because they don't have time to commute. And so companionship is often even sought with animated girlfriends or body pillows. It's not even something to laugh at. It's so sad that people can be deprived of connection because all of their time is spent working for abysmal wages. A counter movement here, which I saw, was that there's a competition going out where people are just laying on a field in the park, and the idea is to just not do anything. But it's not just Japan what these funny people in the Oriental are doing. And that's stereotypically how we think about it. But in the West we have very similar ways that we fetishize work, because we think it is important to give us meaning as a person and make us useful to other people. The system pits us against one another because we think that other people are lazy for having benefits, for example, because they are leeching of our hard work. And in many ways then, just like with the hustle and people thinking that with hard work and good character you can get to the top, the system has been successful at making us fall in love with our own oppression. In this world then, because relationships are not easy, they are difficult because they take time and effort to maintain. We don't have the kind of time and effort to spend on many different people, and so we get to invest all of that energy into one person, a romantic connection. And so, over the decades, the only thing that has kept us going is our fantasy of how beautiful it is to share your entire life with one person, focusing all of your needs and desires and hopes for the world into that one person that got the impossible, improbable task to satisfy you. And that's why I'm saying that nowadays lots of relationships are failing, or people that should not be together are together because we are tasked, we are taught that this is the connection that can make us whole. Lots of abusive relationship dynamics get overlooked because we are afraid of being alone. We start accepting unacceptable behavior, or even feeling that we're settling for someone because they're not fulfilling all our desires. For relationships then to actually be beautiful and fun for both parties involved, we need to relieve some of the weight that our expectations put on the relationship. What I hate about relationships is when they become exclusionary. So when we think that relationships are the end-all be-all, we focus everything into that one person, and that actually isolates us from the rest of the world because we do not see the point or don't have the energy to enrich all of the other connections that are potentially there to love us as well. A very big way that this rears its ugly head of relationships becoming exclusionary is when people limit their partner's interaction with someone of the other sex. Think about not wanting your man to talk to other women in any capacity because it might make you jealous. So we do this by jealousy and our insecurities, in a hetero context that is. Women not wanting their man to talk to other women in any way or liking another girl's Insta picture is just as weird as the fragile masculinity nonsense of you not wanting your girl to post any pictures of herself on Instagram which are beautiful because she might be provocatively dressed or might give other dudes the wrong ID. Having insecurities is human. They are very normal. But you have to be able to overcome them and not justify them like a healthy level of jealousy. Because any relationship is built on a mutual bond of trust. And once you start justifying your jealousy and your insecurities by trying to control your partner's lives, you have already lost. There's no end to this road, and you have admitted to yourself that you do not trust them if you feel the need to control them. The fear that your partner might cheat on you is legitimate and painful, and you might have very real reasons to distrust them of it. But the moment you start giving in to the voice in the back of your head telling you not to trust them, it's already over. Trying to control and isolate them from the rest of the world might sound smart because they won't get in contact with any temptations and therefore not cheat on you. But isolating them actually makes it more likely that they'll cheat on you, not less likely. Think about it like this. If your partner has a problem with the relationship and they have no one else they can talk to, any conflict that you might have might end the relationship. If they have a social safety net to talk to and process their feelings with, they might diffuse the situation so the relationship can live on. And if you are, in fact, successful at separating your partner from any healthy connection with other women, you just have doomed your partner to be emotionally incapable. They'll have to go to you for everything that bothers them. And that might actually become a full-time job for you. You'll have to mother them in many ways. That's not actually a win, is it? Even if by some miracle you have managed to completely isolate your partner from the rest of the world, if they then get into contact with another girl, something you cannot prevent, and they cheat on you, that's not your problem. They made their decision. Remember, Queen, another girl cannot take your man. They then just took your problem. So this is also an exercise in self-confidence, of knowing what you bring to the table and know that you are worth sticking around for. You cannot control your partner out of being disloyal. You can only ever control your end, and if they decide to leave you, that's their loss. While it is normal to have these insecurities, you should be able to openly talk about them with your partner instead of making them cut the ties they have to the social world in order to please you. Do not make your insecurities your partner's problem. That doesn't mean that you cannot talk to them about it, but it means that you do not control their lives as a result of your insecurities, because your trauma and your insecurities are not always your fault as to why they are there, but they are absolutely your responsibility to deal with. Yes, men will go very far to get laid and to get into your pants, and they might not even see a problem with giving up their connections just to be with you, but this will harm both of your lives. Especially the need for emotional intimacy is something that is best shared with lots of people around you, because you get many different perspectives, many rich connections that you can fall back on when the relationship isn't working, and even making sure that the relationship works better by taking some of the pressure of it. This exact scenario of a romantic relationship isolating you in this way happened to my parents for years before they got divorced. When my parents first got together, my father had a very rich social network of both men and women to fall back on. But over time, they got neglected because of his relationship with my mother. It's not just out of malice or anything. It is because when my parents got together and my mother didn't have many people at social network to fall back on, my mother had more need and desire to spend all of her time with my dad. And so my dad spent so much time with her in order to please her. All of a sudden, he did not have time to spend with all of these other friends, and they started to do other things, and he could not pursue that and didn't feel the need to. Over time, when my mother, for example, didn't like my father's friends or didn't want him hanging out with other women, he stopped making an effort to keep these connections going, and they started to fall off one by one. The moment that they were married and actually had us as children, I cannot remember my father having any friends, and my mother as well didn't see the point of doing so. When they got divorced, in many ways both of their worlds completely collapsed, and they might have even divorced way too late, even though the love was gone, because they had very little people to fall back on. And so for years and years they only had each other, and because they were no longer compatible, there was no love there. And as a child you do remember that. For years and years I remember being in a home, and I cannot even have any memories of them being in the same room together. It's not that they were fighting, it's just I don't remember them ever being happy together. And that's quite sad, because for years and years then they have built up so much resentment for one another, but they stuck together because the relationship was the only thing they had. And once they finally got divorced, they both almost immediately jumped into another relationship, not even for the right reasons, but because that's the only thing they ever valued. And as an adult, of course, it's even more difficult to make new friends, and so the loneliness will persist for much longer. So, in short, if your partner is the only person you go to for your emotional needs, if they are the first person you need to talk to about everything that concerns your heart, there is no need to talk to anyone else. And that makes you isolated from the rest of the world, because you need to talk to other people about emotional stuff to grow stronger connections with them. Once you're completely alone with someone, your entire world can collapse at any moment. You are an easy prey to be manipulated, and you will have no one else to fall back on when it happens. Slowly but surely, if relationship expectations like this isolate you from the rest of the world, they become hideous. It'll make you miserable and be your prison. Because one of the most beautiful things in life has now been perverted into something that keeps you from growing as a person. Because you absolutely need all the tools in your toolbox that the social world provides to you. Your family, your friends, especially friends of the other sex, like we talked about other videos, and people from your sports bar, and everyone you could possibly get and their perspectives in order to keep growing. Relationships should add on to your life and help you explore it instead of limiting it by isolating you. Relationships at their best are fun and help you explore a part of life that you cannot explore in any other way, by someone that you entrust probably more than anyone else, but not exclusively. Having someone that you, for example, have sex with or go through the rituals of life with, like meeting the parents, maybe getting married or starting family, is very important. But by no means should it be the only thing keeping you going. So there are parts that you only ever explore with your partner. Keep them precious, but not make them everything. Because just like how your partner is no miracle worker in every way, neither are you. Becoming your partner's everything at all times takes the leisure and fun that relationships should be and turns it into unpaid labor of a social worker. And I ain't got no time for all that nonsense. So, for future Miss Lorenzo, whoever she might end up being, and I would hope that we manifest this into existence together, I hope that she does have her own fully functioning social safety net before she gets into the relationship with me, and I will have my fully functioning social safety net as well. When we then choose to get together, we choose each other and I can trust that she wants to be with me. We will have things that we just share with each other, things that overlap, like probably being intimate, and boundaries to navigate together. But then we make sure that we become the best versions of ourselves and the relationship enriches our lives. Instead of trying to slowly merge into one barely functioning human being, because at that point the dream will turn into a nightmare. So that's part 2 in the series. I hope you really liked this one. Before we talked about having a girl best friend, and now we talked about emotional intimacy further. If you haven't seen the last video, please go and watch that before. It's a banger. I really like the work that's been put in there, and especially the series that we're going for it, because next week we are talking about cheating and how to prevent it and navigate healthy boundaries with your partner as this 3-part series continues. If you really like to enrich our connection, please like and subscribe. Share the video to people that you really care about, that are in a relationship or wanting to be in a relationship, to make sure that they are in a healthy one. And then we can start growing a community of wholesome people, hopefully. If there's nothing further, I'd love to see you in the next one.